It's Friday, July 17th, 2026. Welcome to episode 211 of the Alameda Postcast, an audio service of the Alameda Post. I'm your host, Scott Peeler. In this edition of the Postcast, busy times for the City Council and the Planning Board. A sunken ship finally being removed from the estuary. Alameda Brewing brings home the gold. A bit of Hollywood here in Alameda. Burger King reopens. Plus, something for everyone this weekend, including getting to know the Caroline of Caroline Street. These stories and more on this episode of the Alameda Postcast. Our top story. On July 7th, City Council approved an ordinance to place a $300 million general obligation bond measure on the November 2026 ballot to finance critical infrastructure projects. As previewed in episode 209, the $300 million bond is intended as the beginning of addressing what the city has identified as $800 million in unfunded infrastructure needs, mostly brought on by deferred maintenance and needed facility upgrades. If passed by voters, the measure would require property owners to pay about $49 per year for every $100,000 of assessed value. So, a house appraised at $1 million would see an extra $490 a year in taxes for the life of the bond. Historically, general obligation bonds exist for 30 years before payoff. Of course, factoring in the interest typically paid on such a bond would mean that the $300 million bond would wind up costing taxpayers a total of around $550 million. The measure would also create a council-appointed oversight committee to review and report on expenditures for projects that fall under the 5 authorized capital improvement project categories. Those would be preventing flooding and combating sea level rise, preparing for earthquakes and emergencies, maintaining rapid response to fires, accidents, and medical emergencies, repairing potholes and keeping streets safe and accessible, and keeping pollution out of the bay. While the majority of the council expressed support, Councilmember Tony Daysog dissented, saying, quote, "The argument is being made that this is about letting the Alameda voters decide. In a way, it really isn't, because it is letting future city councils decide how to spend the $300 million. Because if it was about letting Alameda voters decide how to spend the $300 million, you would have had a very specific list," end quote. Upon hearing Daysog's opposition, Councilmember Tracy Jensen acknowledged that the proposed revenue option is not the most equitable and that the project list is not perfect. However, she expressed faith that staff is equipped to make future decisions over project priority and ultimately expressed support for the ordinance. In the end, the measure passed by the required margin of 4-1, with Daysog casting the lone no vote. Details in Ken Durr's article at alamedapost.com/news. That very ordinance will come up again this coming Tuesday, July 21st, as part of the required final reading of such an ordinance issue. In this final step, the council must approve by no less than a 4-1 margin again, thereby adopting a resolution to include the measure on the ballot and approving the ballot question itself. The measure has been entitled the Safer Alameda Act, SAFER serving as an acronym for sea level rise, accidents, flooding, earthquakes, and resilience. The cost of placing the measure on the ballot is expected to be approximately $20,000. Council will also consider placing a charter amendment on the November 3rd ballot that would ask voters whether or not to eliminate the city's elected auditor and treasurer positions and replace them with a governance structure consistent with most other Alameda County cities. The proposal would amend several sections of the city charter and repeal the articles establishing the 2 elected offices. If approved by voters, the change is projected to reduce general fund expenditures by at least $84,000 annually, although placing the measure on the ballot would cost a one-time $40,000. Alameda's charter established the elected auditor and treasurer positions in 1937 with salaries that remain fixed at $3,600 annually. However, the offices also receive employee benefits, bringing total compensation for each position to more than $470,000 over the past 15 years. In Alameda County, only Berkeley and Oakland still elect city auditors. No other city in the county elects a treasurer. Council will additionally consider an ordinance that would make it illegal to park in most bicycle lanes citywide, closing a gap in state law that currently limits the city's enforcement authority. The proposal would prohibit parking in Class 2 bike lanes, Class 3 bike routes, and Class 4 protected bike lanes, while establishing a new $79 citation and $53 late penalty. Currently, California law prohibits parking only in Class 1 shared use paths, leaving the city to rely on inconsistent parking violations such as double parking or parking outside marked spaces to cite vehicles blocking other types of bikeways. The agenda also includes the appointment of members to various boards and commissions. For full details, including ways you can get involved, see Karen Jensen's article at alamedapost.com/news. Karen also covers the planning board for us. On the 13th, planning staff presented an overview of a proposed update to Alameda's downtown commercial zoning regulations for Park and Webster Streets, launching a multi-month effort to reduce storefront vacancies, modernize outdated land use rules, and make it easier for new businesses to open while preserving the district's pedestrian-oriented character. The workshop was intended to gather planning board and public feedback before staff return with a draft ordinance in September and seek city council adoption in the fall. Park Street contains roughly 1 million square feet of commercial space, with more than half of those buildings measuring 4,000 square feet or less. Vacancy rates currently stand at 7% on Park Street, 12% on Webster. By comparison, a healthy vacancy rate is considered to be between 5 and 8%. The current national average of 4 to 6% reflects something of a shortage of available space. Staff said many vacancies could be addressed by updating zoning regulations that currently create unnecessary barriers for prospective tenants. Among the proposed changes, consolidating dozens of specific retail and personal service categories into broader definitions, eliminating use permit requirements for selected businesses, and reserving public hearings for uses that warrant a case-by-case review. Staff noted that obtaining a use permit can add 3 to 12 months to the approval process, creating uncertainty for businesses deciding whether or not to locate in Alameda. Other changes, including allowing grocery stores, convenience stores, beauty salons, gyms, massage businesses, tattoo studios, small offices, outpatient medical, and commercial recreation uses to operate without specific approval. Other proposals include updating regulations for experiential businesses such as escape rooms, permitting billiard halls, requiring transparent storefront windows to maintain active streetscapes, and extending standard business hours from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. with an option to allow businesses to remain open until midnight on Fridays and Saturdays with a use permit. After board feedback, board members directed staff to continue refining the ordinance and return with draft zoning amendments for review in September. The planning board reviewed a draft ordinance to regulate short-term rentals, aiming to balance the preservation of long-term housing and neighborhood character with the ability of homeowners to generate income from activities such as Vrbo and Airbnb. The draft would generally permit short-term rentals only in owner-occupied primary residences or eligible units on the same property, while prohibiting rentals in accessory dwelling units, deed-restricted affordable housing, SB 9 lot splits, and properties with unresolved code violations. There are a lot of details in this particular ordinance. I would strongly recommend you head to the full article by Karen Jensen. You can find it at alamedapost.com/news. Lots of detail about what is and what isn't an ADU. If you've been to the Bridgeside Shopping Center lately, you may have noticed some work going on in the estuary. As reported back in episode 156 in May of last year, the sailing vessel Kaisei sank while docked near the Nob Hill grocery store. Well, work has finally begun on removing that vessel. On their Facebook page, the Alameda Dragonflyers have posted some video and pictures as the job begins. Photographer Maurice Ramirez has also begun documenting the project. We'll keep you posted. Congratulations to Alameda Brewing for bringing home a gold medal from this year's U.S. Open Beer Championship. The third largest beer competition in the U.S. awarded the gold in the herb and spice beer category for Alameda Brewing's Burma Ale, the Gruit tea beer that previously took a silver at the World Beer Cup. The win was announced on Alameda Brewing's social media a mere 4 days after the brewery appeared on the Alameda Connection. Coincidence? I think not. Speaking of the Alameda Connection, I hope you can join me this Sunday morning at 8 on KCSM HD2 when my guest will be realtor Sally Hahn. If you don't have an HD radio, stream the show from kcsm.org. With Alameda's Hala Makana Executive Director Jade Makana Iolio featured in the new live-action Moana as a principal village dancer, it was only fitting for the Alameda Theater and Cineplex to throw a Polynesian bash for the local opening of the film. Story and pictures at alamedapost.com/arts. There was a bit of rejoicing along the South Shore. The Otis Drive Burger King has reopened after months of remodeling. If you're bored this weekend, it's your own fault. So much to do. Hope to see you at Radio Day by the Bay on Saturday at the California Historical Radio Society. I'll be there representing the Alameda Post, and I'm also a cast member in a reenactment of a Thin Man radio play. Details in Melina McLeod's article at alamedapost.com/Alameda-Life. While you're there, check out Amanda Laird's All Around Alameda column. In addition to Radio Day by the Bay, she's highlighting this year's dive-in movie at the Encinal Swim Center, the original animated Little Mermaid, tonight, Friday. Saturday brings Andre Thierry and his accordion for a free family-friendly concert at Franklin Park from noon until 2, courtesy of Rhythmics. Also on Saturday, the USS Hornet commemorates the 1969 splashdown of Apollo 11. Full details in a separate article on alamedapost.com/Alameda-Life. Amanda also checks in with this month's history walking tour as Dennis Evanowski explores the lost neighborhood of Encinal Park. Again, details in All Around Alameda at alamedapost.com/Alameda-Life. You can get background on Dennis's tour by heading to alamedapost.com/history. Sign up at alamedapost.com/tours. Indulge your inner Tommy at Faction Brewing this Saturday with the inaugural Sips and Flips Pinball Tournament. 5 rounds of group match play. Sign up at 1:30. Play starts at 2. Details on Faction's Facebook page. Get the Alameda Post on all your social media platforms, now including TikTok. Get the Postcast wherever you get your podcast, or tell your smart device to play the Alameda Postcast podcast. I'm Scott Bueller, back next Friday with episode 212 of the Alameda Postcast.